So good evening. It is right on the dot. So we will begin our evening together, our inaugural meeting on Words of My Perfect Teacher Review. So Words of My Perfect Teacher Review is that we are going to take a look at some of the major concepts in Words of My Perfect Teacher. I'm also going to refer to some pages that I find very, very helpful and mention some things that we can each read on our own. So by the Words of My Perfect Teacher Review, we'll handpick a few things that are important, and the whole book is important, but we'll tailor it to some of our practices. So the first thing that I want to point out, I don't know, some people might have the older version, which I had, and then I decided to order the newer version so I can make sure that when I'm talking about the pages that I am hopefully correctly identifying them. And when we open, and I'm going to use the hardback right now for my reference, and when we first open to Words of My Perfect Teacher, there is an extraordinary introduction. And I am not going to go over the introduction for this session, but I am going to recommend, well, first of all, we're recommending the introduction, but for those especially who are practicing and have practiced the Nunzhao, page XXV, which is called Stages of Practice, it's about 3.5 pages, I think is incredibly valuable. So even if you don't read the whole intro, which I do recommend, it would be great to read the Stages of Practice because it deals directly with Nunzhao. And as you know, Words of My Perfect Teacher is just an incredible companion for the Longchen Nyingthig Nunzhao practice. And of course, it's by Patrul Rinpoche. And we've talked about Patrul Rinpoche when we were talking about A Marvelous Garland of Rare Gems. So of course, as soon as we open up to chapter 1, we do see someone who is a great master, and it's on next to page 7, so it's page 6, and his name is Jamgon Khyentse Rinpoche from 1820 to 1892, an extraordinary master. And some people were actually asking about what would be a good way to continue with A Marvelous Garland of Rare Gems. And so I do recommend the amazing chapter, I think it's 10 pages of, and it's under the lineages of Jigme Gyaltsen Nugu, who we did discuss. And so Jamgon Khyentse Rinpoche is on page 270. And I find it just so refreshing that his picture and just a little bit about his activity opens up chapter 1. And the reason is that he's one of the main holders of the heart essence of the vast expanse, which we are all very involved in. And he was one of the founders of the ecumenical movement. And we've talked about this word Rime. And that's something very dear to my heart because it's the equal recognition of all of the Tibetan Buddhist lineages and practices. It's not meant to mix, but to recognize each within their own training. And I find that really beautiful. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, open-hearted approach to Buddhism and of course to our lives. So Words of My Perfect Teacher, I know many of you have read Words of My Perfect Teacher. Some people it's the first time, and I do recognize that. And so I'm going to just turn on one thing here. Thank you. So for Words of My Perfect Teacher, we start to look at what it's trying to impart in the beginning pages. And in the beginning pages, it's really a grounding for our practice. It's a stability for our practice. And it also is a way to inform us that there's a very special way of practicing Tibetan Buddhism. And in some discussions, I don't know that there are other traditions that take the time to really enter practice from the point of, in this book, what is called reality. So when we start to open up Words of My Perfect Teacher, it talks about, of course, that we are practicing for really the sake of all sentient beings. It's also that we ourselves, may we ourselves learn the practice so well that we too impart that and impart our Buddha nature. And so we are both establishing a way to open our minds. We are establishing a way to look at ourselves, not just as practitioners, not just as listeners, but with the aspiration that we are going to learn this to such a point that we can impart it to others. So when we look at, again, chapter 1, we read about right attitude and right conduct. And I know sometimes these words, right and the best and so forth, but try to hear it as the way that most enhances, the way that most supports. And we are reminded that we are illuminating who we are, so that when we are bringing forth compassion, when we are bringing forth this ground of how to listen to Dharma, we're also bringing forth the reality of our own mind. So the first step in listening, because listening to the Dharma has a lot of quality to it, that we listen to the Dharma with a vast attitude of bodhicitta. So right away, we're not just going to another lecture, but we are engaging. We ourselves are opening our minds to the mind of enlightenment as we are listening to the mind of enlightenment. It's quite the meeting. And so as we have this opening within ourselves, we are also opening to listening. And it says on the top of page 8, in both texts, for the well-being of all, and the intent is to listen well, learn the Dharma, and subsequently lead to omniscient Buddhahood. So there's no boundaries. We are creating a whole arena of no boundaries, completely open. And the attitude is that each time we do this, we emphasize this approach. At the same time, we acknowledge suffering. And in this chapter, what I personally find so interesting is that we all know suffering. We've looked at it, our minds have turned to the Dharma because of suffering. But here, how suffering is identified, it's identified as ignorance. Now, is it that we're not smart? No. So ignorance here is really the ignorance of what causes happiness. You know, we always say this phrase, may you be happy and have the causes of happiness. But the causes of happiness really is what paves the way. So the reflection on suffering is the reflection on ignorance, and it harks back to when the Buddha was enlightened. The Buddha did not want to teach. And the Buddha said, oh no, they're not going to understand this. Mm-mm. And so it said that there were devas and angels who said, well, look around, because there are some that can have the veils of ignorance lifted if they just hear the Dharma. And so it was with that prompting that ignorance could lift, the veils of ignorance could lift, that the Buddha taught. So here again, in Words of My Perfect Teacher, it talks about, in quotes, this word ignorance, and it really emphasizes confusion. So it doesn't just say, oh, this karma had this and this karma had that, but it's like, no, it really, it causes confusion so that people do have the veils of ignorance. They don't know, they want to be happy. They don't know what causes happiness. They don't want to suffer, but they don't know why. So here we talk about confusion in terms of really understanding karma, talk about suffering and understanding ignorance. So we're working on multiple levels, and we've learned this from our Dzogchen masters from A Marvelous Garland of Rare Gems, who worked on many levels at once. So we too, in following this path, are working on many levels at once. Yes, we're lifting the veils of ignorance. We're also establishing the bodhicitta, the enlightened mind, but not just from outside of ourselves. As Zazen Rinpoche said, already Buddha, and Buddha in one lifetime, of course. And so we, in our practice, want to enhance our positive activity. We want to arouse bodhicitta, and it's for the future as well as the present. And so we're staying present and sealing our positive actions with the sharing of merit. So we create a ground of positive motivation. We incorporate what's called skillful means. The word skillful means is a favorite of mine because it really touches upon what we're doing. And sometimes we go, well, another meditation. No, another moment of skillful means. So on page 9, it says that the profound skillful means makes the potential within us manifest without hardship. So we're applying skillful means so that we can go more directly with the Dharma, and that has less hardship because we follow this way. And also our path, which is talked about quite a lot, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, is aspirational. So we're listening to the Dharma with the mind of enlightenment, and also with the aspiration of sharing that with all sentient beings for the removal of ignorance and also confusion. So I really encourage people to keep in mind this understanding of suffering in terms of confusion and this word ignorance of what causes happiness and what causes suffering. So then there is something also from, I believe, page 9. It's called creating the 5 perfections while listening. So we always hear numbers, right? There's 5 of this, and there's 10 of this, and there's 12 of that. And so in this sense, there are these 5 perfections to keep in mind while listening. And so we might ask ourselves, are we recreating a domain that we know nothing about when we create a beautiful inner temple? Or are we bringing to mind that which already is? So for the practice of mantra, and mantra is part of the Longchen Nyingthig practice, it's also very much a part of the deity practices that is done through the heart essence practices, but also with many, many practices. So that to establish a ground for it's called mantrayana, we want to establish what's called, and again, don't let this word frighten us, the perfect place. And so it might be that we sit down and it was like, are we really in the perfect place for practice? I don't know. It was a rough day, or it took a lot just to get here. And so something that I personally like to reflect on is, first of all, something we've learned about recently, the plasticity of mind. Our minds can change. And the other is that what I personally like to do is to take a moment for what's called the equalizing of self and other. And the equalizing of self and other is recognizing our equality. It's recognizing all of our mind, body, feelings, sensations, thoughts, and anything that we experience as equal. And when we experience it as equal, there's not so much intensity around, oh my goodness, I'm thinking, or I'm at my house, or I'm at my temple, and then I just remembered this. So it's not so much of that when we do the equalizing practice. So we come into what's called, in words of my perfect teacher, the perfect place. And so what's very nice, the perfect place is where Dharma is taught. So that's any place, yeah? So the perfect place is where Dharma is taught, and it's taught in what's called the Citadel of Absolute Expanse, known as Akanishta. And so what is the absolute expanse? It's what is the unexcelled open mind. And what is a citadel? It's a stronghold. It's a high ground, and it protects a city in military fashion. So we have the citadel, a stronghold. And so here we are creating or connecting with what is. And so this absolute expanse is the perfect place, and that's our own minds. And so sometimes do we feel like we're in Akanishta? No, we don't always feel like we're in Akanishta. However, again, due to plasticity, due to our own practice, we can connect. So we're bringing forth what is. We are allowing ourselves to be in the perfect place where Dharma is taught. Is it something we have to do over and over again? Probably we do. Is it worthwhile? I believe so. And I believe that it's worthwhile to emphasize that which is positive within ourselves, that which is accessible to ourselves. And even when we're not totally feeling it, that we can go, okay, I am where Dharma is taught, and that is positive. So we take the steps that we can take. And then when we feel like, yeah, it's pretty cool here, and we feel that we want to help people, we would like to become enlightened to help them, and we would like to listen to Dharma so we could hear it more deeply. And I know for myself, I once went to a Dharma talk, and I knew the teacher, but I'd never heard the teacher talk before. And so I just sat down, and I realized the teacher was teaching, but I was hearing something totally different. And what had happened is that I had a very fresh, open mind. And I felt like this teacher was teaching, but also transmitting. And so that way of listening brought an even deeper understanding of Dharma. And that can happen. So again, we are grounding ourselves with the perfect place, and then the perfect teacher. So here in Words of My Perfect Teacher, the perfect teacher is Samantabhadra. And who is Samantabhadra but the primordial Buddha? And sometimes we could say, we're at a lecture and it's like, I don't know if it's Samantabhadra. I don't know if it's the primordial Buddha. Maybe. However, when we have our intentionality, and again, the word aspiration is used, when we have the aspiration of the bodhicitta, of being able to teach now or in the future, to listen wholeheartedly, it's amazing what we can hear. And so it's not so much about the physical teacher, because in Words of My Perfect Teacher, the teacher becomes the truth body, the empty, unconditional truth. And it's where illusion and ignorance and concept have never entered. And this is a definition from the Rigpa Wiki. So when we approach with our aspiration, with our bodhicitta, it's just incredible what we can open to. So is it this one human teacher, or is it, wow, I'm going to open to the truth body, or I'm going to open up to a place beyond illusion? When we have that as our intentionality, then that's what we're opening up to. Okay. And the primordial Buddha. And then the perfect assembly. And I had Droma or Jennifer to have the refuge tree, I thought would be nice as the perfect assembly, where we have from Words of My Perfect Teacher, the male and the female bodhisattvas and the deities. And also with the recognition of the refuge tree, that it's not solid. This is so incredible that we can have a sense of something that is transparent. And it's for our non-grasping, and at the same time, it's our support. So again, we're creating this ground, we're creating the support of what's called the assembly. And there's an option in Words of My Perfect Teacher that if you want, the perfect place can be the lotus light of Padmasambhava's Pure Land. The teacher can be Padmasambhava. And the assembly can be the 8 Vidyadharas and the 25 disciples of Padmasambhavas and the Dakas and the Dakinis. And the teaching, and what is the teaching? The teaching is the great vehicle. So even if that maybe isn't on the flyer or the roster, that the teaching is the great vehicle, still our intentionality would be to listen for that, to be open to that. And the perfect time is the ever revolving wheel of eternity. So it's any time. So all of these points which are made in chapter 1 are important ways. And in our conversation, it's, I don't know if I've studied in other Buddhist traditions where there is such an emphasis on how we listen with this kind of approach. I know certainly all traditions do emphasize presence, openness, the non-interference of thoughts and concepts, but this is really bringing forth our own inner bodhicitta, our own inner sense of place and our own sense of aspiration to meet the teachings. So it's like the teachings are meeting the teachings, and the Buddha is meeting the Buddha right there. And again, we are practicing to eliminate suffering, the veils of ignorance, to emphasize the causes of happiness, to eliminate the causes of confusion. On the bottom of page 9, there is also a conversation about the teacher. So the teacher is seen as the essence of all Buddhas. Now, it could be kind of confusing. We go to a Dharma talk and we're not so sure, is the teacher all Buddhas? Is the teacher really the union of the three jewels? Is their body the Sangha? Is their speech the Dharma? Is their mind the Buddha? Are they the embodiment of all of it? Are they the union of three roots and three kayas, as it's said? Well, we can listen in that way. We can listen in the way that the potentiality that we have is also the potentiality of what the teacher has. It's the potentiality of what's called the assembly, those listening, so that what we are doing is so integrated that we are integrating our own potentiality with the teacher who may have mastered all of this, the union of the three jewels, the body is Sangha, the speech is Dharma, the mind is Buddha, the embodiment of the three roots and the three kayas. Very well. Even if we do not perceive that, or maybe do not recognize that person like that, we can still listen in a very positive way so that we can hear the essence of what that teacher is imparting. Very much in the same way when I personally went to this lecture, basically just with an open mind, and felt a real transmission during a lecture, which was not talking about what I felt being transmitted at all. So again, I do emphasize the opening, and this is again is with our rationale, shall we say, that we want to skillfully choose who we go to listen to. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama said that one's teacher is who we can hear. And so it is helpful to hear different teachings and to keep one's mind open in this way, and can be very helpful. So there's a key point on the middle of page 10 that we use the basis of our own Buddha nature to become Buddhas of the future. And this is really the key point. So all that's been stated about the perfections and the extraordinary openness of mind, really, if we stay in touch with this aspiration that we use the basis of our own Buddha nature to become Buddhas of the future. And this is also how we listen. Or as Azam Rinpoche emphasizes, Buddha's now. You can become Buddha now. We also work with the word called conduct. And there is some nice pages to read. We can read perhaps on our own, which is 2.1 to 2.11. And then we go to page 16 in the book on conduct, and we start to look at Dharma as remedy. And so, what is the remedy? The remedy is putting into practice that which we have received. There's a very strong emphasis, and many teachers emphasize this. So it's the openness and listening to the teachings, it's the receiving of the teachings, it's the putting it into practice, which is the remedy. I'm sure that you've read in many texts where the Buddha is called the great healer because he brings the end of suffering. And so putting the Dharma into practice is the remedy for the great healer. And then what I really thought interesting on page 17, there is a verse which we say in our Nundro, look on me with your compassion. Look on me with your compassion. And what does that mean? It means accept me as a disciple and give profound instruction. And we take advantage of this compassion and again, put the teachings into practice. And so putting the teachings into practice, we go to page 18, 2.2.2, and there is the transcendent perfections of a listener. And here it's in relationship to a teacher teaching the Dharma. And so one is being generous to the teacher by making an offering, a mandala, or other offerings. And as many of us have done in preparing for retreat, preparing a seat for the teacher, bringing flowers. And the discipline, number 2, is preparing the room, cleaning the space, and being respectful. And number 3 is patience, which is the practice of non-harm, but it's also forbearance. And I don't know how many of us have been to retreats that are too hot, they're too cold, there's a mosquito, there's insects. And so patience is a quality for also taking our retreats and listening. And certainly those who practiced in India had learned a lot of patience. And then there is diligence, which is the number 4, and it's listening with faith. So what is listening with faith? Listening with faith is being open to what is being given. So it might be that sometimes this word faith may project that we believe everything and we have total absolute trust, but then it tells us that we also want to be asking questions, that there is the wisdom piece. We want to clear up hesitation and doubts by asking questions and clarifications. And we also want to listen undistracted, and this is called concentration. So listening and going into retreat or lecture hall involves generosity of making the offering, discipline of preparing a room, patience of non-harm and forbearance, diligence, listening with faith, and without distraction, concentration, and wisdom, clearing up any doubts at all. And so at this time, we're also going to let everybody know that if you would like to put into the chat any questions about chapter 1, this is an opportunity to do the number 6 wisdom, the clearing up of hesitation, doubts, and clarifications. Clarifications are very important. So any clarification, and it's fine to put that into the chat. And finally, it's to drink in the words like nectar. So with our listening, we're just drinking in the words like nectar. And onward to page, I believe it's 20, there's the teachings about the freedoms and advantages and the opportunity to practice Dharma. I think right now, everyone appreciates the time that we have, the safety, the freedom, the actual nutrition. We have enough to eat. We are able to safely hear the Dharma and to take advantage of the freedoms and advantages. This is extraordinarily important because this is our resultant karma that we've put a lot of lifetimes of energy to be able to get here, to be able to hear the Dharma, connect, and to know that there are beneficial ways of doing this. So on one's own, I would recommend reading page 20 to 21. And then at the bottom of page 21 through to 25 are the advantages related to Dharma. There's the individual, which is that we have a human rebirth, that we have what's called a culture in a central place, which means that we have a place where the Dharma is taught. Because some people are born human, but they are not in a place where the Dharma is taught. And sometimes we forget that there's an appreciation for that. And then there's something called circumstantial. And circumstantial means that a Buddha has appeared. So a Buddha has appeared within this, say, kalpa, and that the Buddha has also taught. So there are times throughout history where there was not a Buddha and there was not Buddha's teachings. So although someone could be reborn as a human, someone could have good circumstances, but truly the circumstances that are most useful are that a Buddha has come and a Buddha has taught. So we complete for now to page 25. We did not finish chapter 1, but we will. We will do that next time. There's only a few pages left. And then we will also move into chapter 2, which I believe many people know about, the impermanence of life. I think that it's so helpful to even just taking a moment and thinking, wow, we're born at the time where a Buddha lived. We are born at a time when the Dharma was taught. We have advantages, the freedoms. We have so much supporting us, and that we can open to our Buddha nature, and that we are directed to do so. We are directed to do so. Okay, so at this time, I want to see, are there any questions in the chat? And if there are, we will read them. If there are not, then we will complete the recording so that we can have our reflections on chapter 1.
We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, so what we'll do is that, as we have done before in our sessions, we will complete the recording portion so that we can talk freely without being recorded.